A New Perspective explores breakthrough strategies, techniques, and technologies with leading industry experts to optimize human mind, body, and spirit. A better you enriches the community around you and progressively renews the world. We are a community dedicated to that impact. Welcome to A New Perspective.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to A New Perspective. Today, I am joined by Molly Butler, who actually has been a friend of mine for a little while that I'm very excited to have on the podcast. And I'm going to read her bio. Today is going to be a intense but amazing conversation that I think is super relevant for everything going on right now. But I'm going to read your bio. So Molly is a self-love, self-care coach. She found the world of personal development over a decade ago, but even with all the tools she had, her life came crashing down in 2012 when her father suddenly went missing. After 9 months of many questions and no answers and anguishing pain, she got the dreaded call from a detective, letting her know that he had been murdered. This experience left her feeling helpless, hopeless, and suicidal. Not having the tools to deal with trauma like this, Molly first turned to self-medicating to ease her pain. She quickly learned that what she was really desiring was healing rather than escape. This led her to create a small self-care routine that ended up not only helping her deal with that pain, but was the start of her new journey to help thousands of people to have the emotional tools to deal with theirs. Molly now works with clients ranging from 16 to 63 years old and coaching them on everything from low self-esteem to extreme trauma. She has a passion for helping other humans find their power and peace to live a happy and healthy life. Molly, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super excited.
Yeah, me too. So all of us, just after reading your bio, it's kind of like I can't even imagine going through something as traumatic and as intense as that. But I want to have this conversation, especially right now, because I think, you went something that's like a level 10. Like that's like, I can't imagine many scenarios. And you hear about like a parent losing a child, or you hear about, I guess, like some of these really extreme things. And but even just with where we are today with this pandemic going on and all this stuff, I kind of feel like even if we had things in our lives that were like a 3 or a 4, kind of like pre-pandemic, we've been through so much just craziness in the last handful of months now that I think like all those things are starting to feel like a 7 or whatever. And so, what I hope everybody is able to get out of today's, conversation is really just some tools to be able to kind of help have like a pressure release valve to kind of deal with things. But let's start with you, and let's just dive into your journey to be where you are now. Like walk me through, I guess, that early kind of start to this whole thing. What happened with your dad?
Yeah, so it happened 8 weeks after I moved away from my hometown. I grew up in Florida. I lived there in the same town my whole life until I was 24. I traveled a little bit here and there, but when I was 24, I moved to New York. And about 8 weeks later, my dad went missing. When I first went up there, I was still doing hair at the time. I did hair for about a decade. I loved talking to people, hearing their things, making them feel beautiful. I loved everything about it. My dad came up to kind of just hang out with me for a few weekends while I was there. And about 8 weeks in, he went to his girlfriend's house in Brooklyn and never came home. And I knew something was up. I knew it was kind of like a worst case scenario. 3 days had gone by. He's not answering his phone. He's not answering his texts. And my dad was the kind of guy, he was posting on Facebook like 5 or 6 times a day. He's always texting his friends. If his phone died and he wasn't near a charger, he would go buy another charger. Like that, he was always connected. So when he's offline for, 3-4 days, like I knew, I was like, this is worst case scenario. Nobody was listening to me. I called the cops. They weren't really doing much. Apparently, a lot of people go missing every single day in New York City. So they have a very, very particular set of requirements that you have to be considered to be a missing person. So it was a lot of back and forth, Manhattan cops, Brooklyn cops, trying to just get some answers. Eventually, I went and hired a private investigator because nobody was helping me with anything. I even went to like the Congresswoman's office in New York City. Like I did everything I could.
Yeah. Wow.
No answers, no help, no nothing. Finally, I got connected synchronistically with this private investigator in Florida, who's one of like the best of the best. He used to work CIA for 20 years, all this thing, like kind of like the guy from Taken. Like this was the guy that I got introduced to.
I have a unique
He
set of
happened-
skills. Yeah.
Exactly. He happened to know my dad years prior. He happened to rent office space from my dad. So he knew him personally.
Wow.
He flew up to New York within 12 hours asking questions. We kind of started to shape out the only possibility. Like I just moved to New York. We didn't know anybody there. There wasn't any suspects except for my dad's girlfriend's jealous ex-husband. He was the only person, the only suspect. So we kind of had an idea of what happened. After about 5 weeks of him being gone, my family kind of just like, we're like, okay, like we're pretty sure he's gone. There's no evidence of him, no credit cards were used, no cameras, nothing. It took about 9 months for officially after being interviewed on the news in Florida and in New York and making it a big deal. Finally, they were like, okay, let's get on this case. They ended up finding my dad's body, finally being able to identify it. And they brought the only suspect in for questioning. And after about 21 hours of interrogation, he finally confessed to everything that he did.
Wow.
Yeah. It took about 4 years to close the whole case because it was like 2 years before we can go to court. And when we went to court, we sat in trial. I was, 20 feet away from this man for 2 weeks, listening to all his stories and all the evidence and everything. And it took about 4.5 years and 2 trials to finally get him convicted. And he got locked up. He got 25 years to life back in 2016.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think all of us kind of have like our worst case scenario, like idea, right? Like for some of us, it's just like losing a significant other, like a relation, like we go through a breakup or like, we don't make the sports team or like, something like this is like literally worst case scenario.
Yeah.
I mean, so obviously I'm sure there was some closure and some like feeling of like, okay, at least I know what happened, but I don't know that makes you feel, I don't know how much that helps, right?
Yeah.
Going through that. So like, where were you during this whole time when you go through all that?
So during the first 9 months, I think I kind of wasn't connected to my feelings. I knew that I was like super depressed. I actually felt the moment my dad was killed, like looking back on the evidence, what time and everything. I was actually in the salon and I collapsed at work in the moments that he was killed. And everybody thought that maybe I was just dehydrated or I hadn't eaten enough or whatever. And I didn't even know, why I passed out that day, but I was that connected with my dad. We were so, so, so tight. He was my best friend. We had a very interesting relationship of like, he treated me like an adult since I was younger. We could talk about anything under the moon and it wasn't awkward. It wasn't uncomfortable. Like he was just very like open, non-judgmental, just, hey, you're a human. So we had a really good relationship. So I knew the moment it happened. And that's kind of how I knew within a few days. I'm like, this is worst case scenario. I can't even feel him. And I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I knew that there was something to it. So I think for the first 9 months before we actually knew for sure, like with evidence that he was dead, it was just like part of me had died too, but I was also still in such a go mode. Like I need to find answers that I was kind of disconnected from my own personal process, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I imagine it would almost feel like surreal. Like
you're
absolutely. Almost like I'm like in a movie or like I'm like, not, this isn't real. Like this,
Sure.
like a disconnect.
Yep. And that was also right around the time Breaking Bad got really popular. I was like watching TV shows like that, which like, sends your mind into all these other different directions. So yeah, I was in a really like deep, dark place, but it was almost like my mind was able to take over in the way of like, I just need to keep searching to find answers. And then once I find answers, I can kind of like deal with my process.
Right.
I was also in New York alone. My best friend was there with me and I had a boyfriend at the time, but I had just moved there. I didn't know anybody. My whole family, brother, sister, mom, were back home in Florida. So I was constantly relaying information and holding space for their process and all this. So the first 9 months was a little just kind of all over the place, just get stuff done. And when I wasn't getting stuff done, I was just binging Netflix's like it was my job, just like trying to zone out any way that I could.
Right.
And then after the 9 months, once we found out, it was a little bit of a relief to just know, to have some answers. But then it was also like, okay, the trauma's actually hitting us now. Like this is real. It's happening. Fell into a deep, deep depression. There was a few months where I did not leave my apartment. I did not get off my couch. Like even to drag myself over to the bathroom was hard, eating. Some days I wouldn't eat at all. Some days I was eating more and more and more, just like doing whatever I could to cope. You know, in my bio even said like, I knew personal development. I know how to get a hold of my negative thoughts and make them positive, but I had never been through anything like this, and none of the tools I had was working. It was just, I was depressed.
I mean, honestly, like, I couldn't even imagine. I'm trying to think like losing a brother, a mother, a parent, like, and not just, I mean, I've lost a grandparent before, like to cancer, but it's different, right? When you go through something that's totally almost feels like somebody robbed you. Like, I mean, it literally, I got stolen from, and I'll never, it's just, I mean, that's, so how long, I guess, did you kind of stay in the depressed place where you just were like, everything
It's kind of
sucks?
hard to remember. It's a little foggy. I want to say like maybe 4 or 5 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then this weird thing happened. One day I was sitting on my couch, and I think I was like in between shows. I was trying to like decide what I was going to watch next or something. I had like a moment of silence, and I'm sitting on my couch, and I feel the emotions start to come up. I'm about to just like start bawling. And I felt like an actual hand like touch my shoulder. And it felt like my dad sat next to me, put his hand on my shoulder, and he just said, Butler, he always called us Butler, what are you doing? Like, you still have to live your life. And, at first when it happened, like I heard his voice and I'm looking around, I'm like, I am freaking crazy. I'm those people that you hear about that just start seeing people and hearing voices and all these things. I'm going crazy. But it felt so real that it was enough to shake me and wake me up. And I was like, okay, I need to do something about this.
Yeah.
I can't, he's gone. There's nothing bringing him back. This sucks, but I can't just sit here and just let my life waste away.
Sure.
And at this point, I was also teetering back and forth. I was really contemplating suicide. I had already had the plan of like how I was going to do it. I was already in the process of writing letters to my brother, my mom, my sister to let them know it wasn't their fault, but I just couldn't deal with it.
Wow.
I was in that place.
Yeah.
And I had planned I was gonna kill myself 2 days before this shoulder on my hand happened. So I don't know what it was. All I knew was there was some kind of connection. Something woke me up. So then I started just doing anything that I could. I up until this point, I never really tried any kind of like drugs or anything. I had tried a little marijuana, alcohol, like a teenager does, but nothing too crazy. I never had a desire to try anything, but I knew that the general consensus I had heard of drugs, if it makes you forget all your problems, that's all I was looking for. So I experimented a little bit with drugs. I felt good, like in the moment. And then I felt even worse after a few times. I'm like, this is not what I'm looking for. I tried going on walks. I tried talking to people about my problem. I went to, many, many therapists. I was getting so desperate. I remember reading this thing about monks, and they said that monks literally just sit in a meditative state 24/7, and they are in a state of pure bliss. And I thought it was crazy the first time I read it, but when I reread it at the time that I was desperate, I was like, that's what I'm looking for. Like, I'm looking for just like peaceful bliss where I don't have to feel this anguishing pain, the questions, the stories, the fear of my own life. So I started meditating. I started using guided meditation apps, and I just started to see like, can I get to the state that the monks experience all the time? And I also found yoga around the same time. I heard the same thing about yoga. When you get into a yoga pose and you're in this and you're breathing, and I thought it was all crap, but I was desperate and I was like, well, let me try these. So weirdly enough, through meditating and yoga, I found like myself, my peace, my center. There was something that happened after about a week of stepping on my mat every single day. There was one day I put both of my feet on my mat, and as I stood there for a second, I closed my eyes, I took a breath. I felt different than I had ever had in the time of my dad being gone, and also in my life. There was a new kind of alignment, a new kind of purpose, a new sense of direction. And it wouldn't last very long. When I first started doing it, it would last while I'm in the session, then it would be gone. But it started to linger more and more. The feeling of peace and bliss and almost feeling like control of myself and my emotions, when before I had felt so out of control. I started feeling this like, okay, wow, this is actually it started to gain momentum. I started doing that more and more, then started getting more into health and what can I put into my body. And I almost got obsessed with this way of living.
I just want to touch on that. You just said something I think is so profound, because I think I mean, I'm just going to relate it to what everybody's going through right now. Like, it's so easy to feel like we are the victims of the external world
Yes.
that's happening and everything that's going on. And whether it's like the news media, the news decides what I feel for today.
Yep.
And, whatever the external circumstances are that are going on, that determines, if I'm feeling, and so many people wake up in the morning and go like, man, I really hope I'll feel good today. Like, I really hope. And we'll see, but there's not really like a strategic plan to like kind of take control. And I love what you just said there, because it's like I had this like groundedness almost of like, I feel like I actually control my body. I feel like I can control my mind. And that is such a rare thing, I think, especially when there's trauma like all of us are experiencing right now.
Yeah. World trauma, especially in America.
Right, right. So yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. So it was just throughout the time, once I started to feel that grounded feeling more and more, that control, I got almost addicted to it in a sense, which thank God the addiction I found was a healthy one.
Yeah.
Especially because I was looking for escape. And what I found was actually, I always say I actually found myself. And what I mean by that is I felt that sense of control, that sense of grounded. I felt like I could, when something happened and I had an emotion come up, I was able to breathe through it instead of letting my mind go off and attach to all these negative things and spiral out and end up depressed again. So I found that over time, everything that I was doing, it kind of like compounded on top of each other. So it wasn't as if I was doing more. I was doing the same little things every single day. But after a week, after 2 weeks, after a month, after 3 months, I was almost a completely different person. And I remember there was a visit, I went back down to Florida, for legal stuff with my dad. And I was sitting with a group of friends and we started talking, and I noticed someone said something and it triggered me. And I noticed, the shortness of breath. I started to sweat, I started to get really hot. And I started like the thoughts came in, and I remember I just closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. And then when I responded, it was a completely different response. And I remember a girl looking at me, one of my friends, and she looks at me and she goes, "Did you start practicing yoga?" And I was like, as a matter of fact, I did. And she goes, "The way you handled that was just so calm and centered." She's like, "That was really beautiful." And when I got that reflection, I was like, wow, this stuff is actually really working. There's something to this.
Sure. Yeah, I got into yoga. Honestly from a sports standpoint, just because I was an athlete my whole life. I played 5 sports in high school, and I love, usually it's like hitting the weights or like pushing myself for performance. And then getting on the yoga mat, you see these girls that are just like smoking everybody. Yeah. And you're like, what on earth? I'm pouring sweat out of my body. And like, I think it was probably after the 2-week mark of doing yoga for me where I noticed like flexibility like I had never had. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize how important just flexibility is, like just being able to be a little more flexible, but also just the zen that comes out of like just matching your breath to the movement. Yeah. And that like almost getting into that, like they call it a flow state, right? Where you're just in that state of flow where your action and your awareness kind of merge into one, and you're not thinking about what you're doing. You're just being, you're doing it, and you're like present to what you're doing.
Exactly.
It's a really cool space to be, and that's one of the best benefits I've gotten out of it for sure.
Yeah. I always love hearing the different angles of how people get introduced to yoga, because I think like when yoga became popular, it just became this fad, right? It's like, it's the leggings, it's the sports bras, it's the super fit people. Like it became more of a fad of like exercise and sport and flexibility than it did of like what's actually at the core of yoga. It's very similar to a lot of like sports and other things that we could do where you do access that flow state. But I think it's different in the fact of when you're in a flow state in like a high contact sport like football or something, you're focused, you're grounded, you're in the flow, but you're not paying as much attention to all of your systems in your body and how your body is getting you into the place that you're at. Yoga just brings the mind awareness to match the same feeling of flow. So I think it's a really special and unique thing. And I think a lot of people get something out of it because it's an experience that we are not taught to have and that we don't experience on our own typically if we don't know of these things.
Yeah, I almost liken it to dance, right? Like I don't know if you've ever I've done like ballroom dancing and things like that, and it's
beautiful.
You can get into a flow state with a partner where, as a guy I'm leading, but also my partner has such a dramatic impact on the dance, right? And so and there's not, I'm not saying, hey, we're going to go over here and now I'm going to spin you here, and like where it's not being spoken, but it's like this super awareness that we both have kind of this like hive mind, and we're both in that place together. Yeah,
right?
totally.
You feel each other and you both just know.
Totally. And that's where I think in yoga too, that it's almost, I mean, you're in that with your own body. You're just kind of like pushing yourself to see if you can go a little bit deeper, a little bit farther. And it's, I definitely love it. I know you're a big yoga person. That's cool.
Yeah. I've incorporated, it's funny you say dance. I've been a dancer my whole life.
Really?
Not so much partner dance, but more solo dance and stuff. Yeah. It's one of my deepest passions, my biggest releases. It's where I feel the most myself, the most expressed, and self dance is definitely a form of that. So it was an easy transition for yoga for me. And then what I learned from yoga, what I learned from dance, kind of able to like marry the two. And now I kind of do a little like dance yoga on my own.
Nice.
It's great.
That's great. Yeah. So you kind of dive in. So I've talked to Sherry, who I need to get my other friend Sherry in here on a podcast too.
But that'd be great.
Right? She does so much good stuff. But she talks a lot about just like, you're the one that taught her on this, just like building a routine of things that I'll let you describe, I guess, what self-care, self-love is. And also I want to kind of preface this, like, as a guy, my first reaction when Sherry started telling me about this stuff was like, oh, like that's for girls. Like, you know, you guys, like, I considered it as like pampering, right? As like, oh, like, you guys go like to the spa or like you do your thing, but like, we don't do that. I don't know. Like, you guys, whatever. But she's like, you idiot. It's not pampering. It's like self-care for you as a guy could be going, playing sports, going, doing whatever you love to do. That kind of like is that pressure release valve that makes you feel good. But maybe you can describe a little bit on like, I guess what you mean, especially for the guys in the audience that are like, can I do this? What is this?
Yeah, cool. So I like to use the analogy of a self-love cup. So when I say self-love and self-care, I use them interchangeably. The difference for me is self-love typically for me is the mindset. It's the being. Can you sit in a room with no distractions and enjoy the company that you keep? Or is your mind telling you how you're not good enough or you're too much or, whatever your mind does? Can you sit in this peace and stillness and enjoy the company you keep? That's self-love to me. It's a lot of mindset stuff. Self-care is the doing. It's the actions that you take to back up the self-love. It's the things that you do to literally take care of yourself. So we have the being and the doing, right? We all have, there's these like masculine and feminine energies, and it doesn't relate to male, female. Masculine just means like it's an action item. It's very, it's a penetrative motion. It's moving forward. It's taking action. Feminine is the more relaxing. It's the being. It's the floating in the pool. It's allowing. But both of them are absolutely necessary in all humans. We need both. It's kind of like the gas and the brake. You're not going to drive a car with just the gas, and you're not going to drive a car with just a brake. You need both. They work together. So self-love and self-care to me is the main vehicle that we can use to center ourselves, understand who we truly are, and then use that as our GPS to get around in the world. So that's kind of the framework that I use. And then for self-care, the way that I like to explain it is kind of like if you have a self-love or a self-care cup. It's like if you have a cup and you try to, if it's filled up with water, you try to pour it out to everybody. Once your cup is empty, you can't really pour it out to anyone else anymore, right?
Sure.
This is what happens with overgivers and people pleasers. They give and give and give and give. And then before you know it, they're resentful of people. They're drained. They're burnt out. I'm all saying this from very personal experience.
This is my pattern. This is what I do.
Right. The first 25 years of my life, I didn't even know that no was a word I can use. Boundaries were just out the window. I was always giving. And I found through that process that I realized I was giving so much and even more than I had, because really deep down, I thought the more I help people, the more they kind of have to love me and maybe they won't leave me. It all comes from a place of insecurity.
Wow.
So once I realized if you're trying to pour from an empty cup, there's nothing to give. Literally, there's nothing to give. So you're responsible for filling your own love cup. Of course, other people can energize you too. Like people say, oh, well, my romantic partner energizes me. Absolutely. But if you're relying solely on other people to fill your cup, you're going to be disappointed every single time. Every single time. So it's this idea of, how do I fill myself up? What does that look like to you? And like Sherry said, it's different for every person. For men, maybe, yeah, maybe there is more some action in it because that fills you up, that energizes you. But I guarantee a nap and watching your favorite show on Netflix is also going to do the same thing. It
Right.
just depends on where you're at that day. So it's constantly shifting, it's constantly changing. But what I help people do is figure out what self-care looks like to them, what truly energizes them. I love taking a bath. It really relaxes me. And after I get out, I'm ready to conquer the world. Someone else might not like laying in a tub of water. So I don't ever claim to say, like, these are the things that's going to make you good. It's no, we explore what feels good for you. These are things that you put in your body. These are things you put on your body. These are things you put in your brain, conversations that you have, interactions you have, physical things you do. It includes a whole different array of things, but it's just
Yes.
to back up and to fill your cup so you have even more to give.
That is incredible. So, okay, let's go back to your kind of journey then. So you pick up yoga, you kind of find this thing that starts making you feel a little bit more like you again. And I guess where does it go from there? How do you get from, how do you start piecing together the other aspects of like your routine?
Yeah. So my story is very unique, obviously, with my dad element in there. It's also unique in the fact that I did hair for about 10 years. And right around the time my dad went missing and I got super depressed, I started to go into work. And when people started complaining about their problems, I noticed my self love cup was very empty. So when people are complaining about, oh, I went to a party and Susie was wearing the same dress as me, I'm very bitter about it. I'm not saying it outwardly, but I'm just thinking, listen, if your dad's not missing or in a ditch somewhere, I don't want to hear this problem.
Right.
So I noticed, I was like, okay, I don't have a lot of tolerance for this right now. I think I actually want to do something different. Standing on my feet 14 hours a day with my arms in the air, like, it's very, very taxing. And now the mentality part was taxing too. So just in general, it started draining me. And I started realizing, like, okay, I need something new. But at this point, I didn't go to college. I went to cosmetology school to learn just hair. So I'm like, what do I do outside of this? Like, where do I go from here? So I ended up the we were trying to sell my dad's insurance company that he owned. And instead of selling it right away, I decided to get my insurance license and go and learn from the bottom up and just see, is this something that I want to maintain, save his legacy? He opened it when I was 10 years old. I don't want to see it go. So I gave it a shot. Like, it's something new. I did that for about a year and a half. Turns out I am not a 9 to 5er. I am not an insurance girl. I'm just, no, I need substance. I need depth. So in that, I decided to sell the company, and I made a promise to myself when I sold it. I'm never going to do something for money, and I'm never going to do something because I feel like I should or I have to. Because, we're told, like, get good grades, get a good job, do all these things, get married, have kids, save for retirement, hope you have enough at the end, and try to stay sane throughout all of it. But
Right.
it's this very particular box that we're told to live in. And I always just I never liked that. I always thought that there was something more. So the insurance company was like a good transition for me. And I made those promises to myself. So when I sold the company, I was in a very unique position of, I had time freedom and money freedom at the same time. Most humans don't get that chance. I
Sure.
know that in that sense, I was lucky. Of course, my dad had to be murdered for me to get there, but it was also, I was very fortunate to have time and money freedom. I could do literally whatever I wanted. So I just started really upping my self love, my self care, and I just did what nourished me all day, every day for a while. And after about a year and a half, I had a girlfriend contact me. She's like, hey, I had started doing like Facebook Lives and just trying to share stuff that I had learned about myself. And like, hey, this helped me. If this can help you, awesome. If it doesn't, cool, pass it along. And one of my girlfriends messaged me and she's like, hey, I don't even know what you do, but I feel like I'm supposed to hire you. I was like, what does this even mean? She said, I want to learn to live my life the way that you live it. She's like, I can't believe that, you're living this life after going through something so tragic. You must have something I wanted. My first client was born. I never thought that I was going to coach people. I never wanted to get into it. It literally fell into my lap. After I started coaching her, a couple more people happened, a couple more happened, a couple more happened. Till this day, I've been doing this for about 4 or 5 years now, exclusively, nothing, no other jobs. And it I've never advertised, I've never marketed. It's literally all word of mouth. It's people. It's just like, I always say, if I say something and there's something that resonates with you, just reach out to me. Let's have a conversation, see what's going on.
Wonderful.
But it literally just fell into my lap, and I just started helping people literally all over the world. I've never had a client in the same space as me. They're always in, all different parts of the world. And it's just been awesome sharing my experience, my journey, what I have learned, and helping people figure that out for themselves, what that looks like.
Are most of your clients going through different trauma events as well? Or is that typically the person that hires you? Or is it people that are...
I've had a couple people go through like really extreme traumas, but most of the time people come to me simply just saying, I'm just not that happy with my life. And I kind of feel guilty for not being happy because I actually have it pretty good. It's typically that kind of thing. It's either I just got out of a breakup, or I, transition new job. I have no idea who I am. There's other people that come and they say, I'm just not really that happy. And I know that there's something more, but I don't know how to get there. There has also been extreme trauma, but it's been a big array of things. But most of the time, it's just like, I just want to be a little bit more happy and I don't know how to get there.
Sure.
I just think something's missing.
Kudos to you, I have to say, on getting to a place. Number one, it's hard to start a new business kind of anytime, right? Like, but especially
Absolutely.
when your love cup, to use your language, is empty,
Yep.
and you feel kind of like just rocked, and
Yeah.
and then to like be able to kind of put your head down and go build something new, and like it's hard. It can be hard to go do something like that. And so kudos to you on just taking the leap and going and doing that. And also it's pretty amazing, I think, when you just kind of, I love what you said there, of like, I'm not going to do something just for the money. I'm not going to do something that I just did, sucks, that I don't enjoy. I'm going to do something that that feeds me and fills me up. And then it's kind of amazing how when you kind of jump on that path, it kind of provides a way for you and kind of makes things happen, which is really cool too.
Yep. Yeah,
So.
there's definitely been some stressful points because I don't market or advertise or anything like that. Like, I just share my personal story and I let people know there's an open door to talk to me. There has been times where like, oh my gosh, like, how am I going to pay my rent or something? But every time I just sink back into that, when I'm aligned, when I'm grounded, when I'm standing in my true self, I am always provided for. And it has happened every single time. Like it never fails. So no matter, I still have fear all of the time. I still don't know how I'm going to make it work sometimes. And it just keep, like, as long as I surrender and trust and just fall back into it, it just keeps showing up in bigger and bigger ways that I didn't even know was possible.
That's amazing. So walk me through. All right. So let's give the listeners here maybe a little something tangible that they can kind of do starting today. Because I think there's probably a lot of people, just obviously with everything going on politically and just sociologically and economically, and there's so much stuff that I think for the average person that's listening right now, if we can kind of give them, if you were sitting down with them face to face and they were just saying, hey, like, I just feel stressed in the morning. I wake up in the morning stressed, and then the day starts, and then the kids are crying, and then I got house duties, and then the job, and I come home at night and I feel like, I got a list of things that are constantly there and piling up, and I feel like I'll go knock 3 or 4 things off my list and there's more stuff there. This is kind of the average American lifestyle, right? This is what we do.
Totally.
What would you say, I guess, to where somebody starting and kind of making some of these changes?
Number one, hands down, the first thing that I always say, be easy on yourself.
Okay.
Every single human I've ever talked to, and I've done a lot of traveling, been to 30 countries, like every single person, we all have this tendency to have really high expectations of ourselves, really high standards, and we're always letting ourselves down. And then we're beating ourselves up, expecting us to change more. It doesn't change, and we're just stuck in this cycle. It's amazing what giving yourself a little bit of space and compassion could do for your entire day. So the first thing is just be easy on yourself. Give yourself credit for all the things that you are doing, all the things that you have done, everything that you currently have. Just, even if you take 30 seconds, that is sufficient enough. Just give yourself a moment, maybe even put your hand on your heart to connect with your body and just be like, hey, you're doing way better than I give you credit for. Be easy on yourself. Number one,
Love
hands
that.
down.
Yep.
Second, breathe. I know this is such a cliche thing, especially in the yoga world. Just connect with your breath. None of us like hearing it. But the fact is, you're walking around all day, every day, breathing, and you're not thinking about it. Your breath does it for you. Your lungs are functioning, your blood is flowing, your body is working without you even putting a thought to it. When you put your thought to it, you close your eyes. I always say put your tongue on the roof of your mouth. It just sends signals to your nervous system to tell it to relax. Closing your eyes, putting your tongue on the roof of your mouth, taking a long, slow, deep inhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Even one breath, if you can do three, even better. If you can do more, even better. But even one, just taking a conscious breath, you'll notice your nervous system literally calms down. And I think everybody needs that, right? We're all in this fight or flight state of, just like you said, the moment I wake up, I'm anxious, I have this to do, I have this to do, I do this, and then something else come in. When it rains, it pours. We're all living in fight or flight. We will never find peace. We will never find clarity. We'll never find grounding in that place. It's impossible because your systems are literally just trying to get you to survive. So taking that breath, calming down, as cliche as it sounds, every single time I've walked anybody through that, they're like, wow, like I don't need any money for this. I don't need any time for this. I don't need any energy for this. Literally just closing your eyes, taking a breath. It just gives you that clarity of like, okay, what to do next. So those are the first two things anybody can do anytime. It literally 1 minute, 30 seconds for being easy, 30 seconds for a breath. Boom, you're already having a better day, start of a day than you've ever had before.
Love it.
And then on top of that, just finding little things that feel good for you, like finding your self-care. If you can take 10 minutes to just go on a walk in nature, 10 minutes to just sit in silence, or 10 minutes to watch your favorite show, 10 minutes to talk to a good friend, whatever it is that makes you feel good, adding even just the tiniest little bit of that to every single day, it gains momentum. It compounds over time. And the more you do that, the more space you have, the more energy you have, the more you can, more of other things that feel good that you can bring in. And the more and more, it starts to shift it from the ground up. Instead of trying to knock the whole building over, like, oh yeah, we're going to start working out 5 days a week, or we're going to start, eating really healthy and, no sugar, whatever it is. We don't need the extremes. The extremes don't work. The extremes work for a very short amount of time. We fall and then we're hard on ourselves. We try to go to the extreme again. We're hard on ourselves. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It's the little things compounded over time that actually create sustainable change where you're actually going to feel different and your nervous system's going to calm down. You're going to find those things that you're looking for.
Let me ask you something. I just had this thought. So
Yeah.
A lot of times when we go through extreme trauma, I can just, in my own personal life, right? It's sometimes you kind of adopt this identity of like, I'm a broken person.
Yes.
Right? It's almost like somebody who's been through a car wreck and like your legs gotten mangled and you just think like, yeah, I might, be able to like walk on crutches or something, but I'm never going to run. I'm never going to jump. I'm never going to play like I used to. And I'm sure that you went through something like that, right? Where you just feel
Absolutely.
like, hey, like I might, be able to have a relationship, but maybe I'll never be the person I could have been, and I'll never have joy like I could have had. How did you, or maybe I don't know if it happened consciously or if there was a moment where like your identity shifted to where you're seeing yourself in a way that you would be a healed person and that you could integrate this trauma to actually be something part of your story that helped empower you, that kind of gave you a fresh identity and a fresh chance at like being the best version of yourself. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think in the beginning, I absolutely felt like the broken person. I didn't really want to tell anybody that was going on. Of course, it was all over the news. So everybody that I knew what happened to me. But I really did go into that shell. I didn't want people to like pity me and feel sorry for me and all this stuff. Then I went through a phase of wanting people to pity me. Like if I got upset about something, I'm like, well, your dad wasn't murdered. And I'd like throw it back in their face.
Sure.
So there was a lot of different things like that. And then I remember I actually sat down. I took a backpacking trip to Europe and I booked myself an apartment that was like 20 minutes away from any kind of civilization. I was there alone. And the purpose was to write my dad's story. My dad was a very big storyteller. He was the center of attention anywhere he went. Everybody knew him all the time. And I knew that he would want this story to be a story. So I sat down, I started writing it. I got about 3/4 of the way through. It was very heavy to try to write it because I had to like relive every single bit of it. But it was good for me to process. Cause like I said, that first 9 months, I wasn't able to. So this was like my way of processing it. And at first when I started writing, it was to kind of like save my dad's legacy and, to share this. But I realized that there was a part of me too that wanted to present to the world of like, this is something that I went through. So you should give me a little bit of a break. And then as I got to like maybe half, 3/4 of the book, I realized I actually don't know if I want this to be like, if I'm ever going to be an author or publish anything, I don't know if I want this to be the thing that people know me for, because I don't know if I want to be known as the girl who has a murdered dad like her whole life. I didn't want to identify with that.
Yeah.
Right? So I started asking myself questions. I started getting into that. And what I realized that instead of putting the book out, I just simply started talking about my experience with people that I loved and trusted and I knew would support me no matter what. And the reflections that I started getting back to them were, even though these people hadn't been through anything like I had, the emotions that I had about the situation were emotions that they can relate with, because emotions, no matter what, all humans experience the same emotions. So you don't have to have the same situation to relate. It's the emotions. So as I started sharing this, people were telling me, your story helped me so much. Just hearing you and the process that you went through and the things that you were feeling, it made me feel not alone. It made me realize that I can do something about it. And in the reflection, that's how I started to become conscious that, wow, my biggest wound can maybe be my biggest asset. I've always loved helping people. It was one of the things that I loved about doing hair. Like, everybody knows when they get their hair done, mostly women, I'll know, they sit in the chair and they just pour everything out. I've heard more times than anything in my life, I can't believe I'm telling you this. I've never told anybody this before, And I loved that. I loved that closeness. And I've always loved giving people different perspectives and stuff. I have the gift of what I call objectivity. It's a blessing and a curse, but I can always see multiple sides of the same story. So when someone would come to me, we're always stuck in our own view, right? We always have this one way of looking at it. We feel stuck. We don't know. It's simply a shift of perspective. When we see it from a different angle, we go, oh, okay, this could be something different. And I think me sharing my stories and getting the reflections that it was helping people was that perspective shift that I needed to realize, if I can be honest with myself and be honest with other people and be transparent about this pain and anguish, the thing that I wanted to run away from so long, if I just embrace it and share it in a very human way, other people can relate to it, get something out of it, and they can help themselves. And I just turned my blessing or my curse into a blessing.
Wow. Yeah. That's wonderful. So 10 minutes a day is about kind of where you start people at, just doing something for 10 minutes or?
Yeah, I never like to give like anything more than that, because, a lot of people, like we said, January, we all know we all sign up for gym memberships in January. By March, we're never in the gym again until next year, right? Right. So we're all looking like, especially when people come to me with big traumas, breakups seem to be one of the biggest things. Like, we're relational beings. Everything we do is in relation. We like to think that when we're successful, it's business and money. But when our relationship is bad, even if we're the most successful, we feel like a failure, right? Like this is the thing we hold closest to our heart, because that's where it sits.
Totally.
When we're doing business and success and stuff, it comes from the mind. But when we're relating, it comes from the heart. So, excuse me.
Bless you.
So, I think I lost my train of thought there.
Talking about just being relating and talking about coming from the heart.
Yeah, as we come from the heart. Oh, so not overloading them. So breakups seem to be the place where people just like, we lose our freaking minds. I've done this almost every single breakup. I don't know who I am, what I want to do. Everything just feels like it's the worst thing ever. I like to use the example of breakup because most people can relate to that. They can't relate to like their father dying,
Sure.
But almost everybody can relate to a breakup. That
Sure.
sense of like, I don't know who I am. We like to escape from the pain. We all are programmed to, I'm feeling this, I don't want to feel this, I'm going to go to the opposite way. But when they come to me, I make them realize like, escape is not actually what we're looking for. It might feel good in the moment that you're escaping, but chances are you're avoiding the feelings that you have. Like, it's just going to compound, and the escape is going to get harder. You're going to have to get more extreme with it. You're going to get more dramatic. And eventually, before time, it's just not going to help anymore. So like I said before, it's the little things that we do. So when someone's coming to me and they're looking for any kind of change in their life, we start extremely small. And sometimes it's frustrating in the beginning. It's like, I just want to get out of this right now. So I give them tools to how to sit with those feelings when they come up. But we literally like, listen, 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, just do something really small for yourself for an entire week. And let's talk next week. How did you feel? What was the difference I experienced? Can we add more on now? And we go through these baby steps. And sometimes people are ready to do, I'm ready to do 5 things a day. I'm ready to do like 4 hours a day. Great. If you're there, cool. Let's work there. You can add even more. But I always work with people where they're at. And most of the time, like you said, it's the rat race. The second I get up, there's a billion things to do. So if I were to come to them and be like, 4 hours a day, you got to meditate, you got to do yoga, you got to eat, they're going to be like, no, I'm not doing that. So it's bite-sized pieces. It's the little tiny things that make it doable. I can do this. I get my clients to say, I can do this. If we can find something that you can do very little every day, we eventually add on more and more. That's how it's sustainable.
I'm reading this book right now called Atomic Habits, and it talks about just, basically in everything that you do, like, whether it's working out, right? Like you eat a healthy meal, and it isn't like you like have the body you're looking for, or
right.
you go to the gym and like all you really get is sore. You're not like,
right.
like oh, this is worse.
Sore and sweaty.
But I mean, there's this kind of magic tipping point, right? Where it's like you just do it consistently enough, and even though you don't see the results necessarily in the first, maybe even first couple of weeks of doing it, it's just the consistency of doing it over and over again. All of a sudden there's your body starts to transform, your mental health starts to transform. There's that shift that happens. And I'm sure it's similar in guess the line of work that you're in, but it's, that's really cool.
Yeah. It's really cool seeing the progress in it. Cause like same idea. If we take the gym analogy, if someone goes to the gym every day for 3 months, they experience really extreme results most of the time at the end of those 3 months. And then people think that if they stop going to the gym for a month, they're going to be back to where they started originally. That's never the case, right? Your body already has the muscle memory, the composition. You've already lost the body fat. So you're not starting from where you are before. So I really like this process of like taking the baby steps and recognizing the compounded effect. Because if someone's doing self-love, self-care consciously for like a few months and then something happens, we tend to beat ourselves up again. Like, oh, I'm starting back from scratch. And I always like to remind people, like, it's the same thing as the gym. Like you already have muscle memory. So, like I've been practicing this for over a decade. So now when something catastrophic happens in my life, it still does, because that's what life is, right? Like just because I'm taking care of myself and I have these tools doesn't mean that life isn't going to happen anymore. It just means that when life happens, like in the past, say I go through a breakup, all I want to do is, binge watch Netflix and maybe smoke some marijuana or eat like junk food and, talk crap about people. Like it's very like what I would say low vibration stuff that doesn't actually make me feel better, but it does take my mind off the thing.
Sure.
Now I know the compounded effect that doesn't actually help me in the long run. I have such a felt sense of what self-care does. So now when something catastrophic happens, I go and buy a ton of organic food. I juice, I meal prep, make sure I have good, healthy meals. I make sure I have like salts for my bath. I make sure that I have my sneakers to go for a walk. Like I make sure that I have all the things that I need to take care of myself, because those things will also distract me from what I'm feeling, but in a way that's going to compound in the direction that I want to go.
That's killer. And you get the distinctions to tell when you're off track or not.
Yep.
I think that's where most of us are right now, is it's like, especially guys, I'll pick on my people a little bit, is just, how do you feel? Bad or nothing, or just like, you don't even have the distinctions of like, well, I think I'm about half full in my love cup.
Yeah.
Like, maybe
Totally.
I'm running at 20% here. Like most of us don't even have those distinctions to know, but that's so cool to hear that you say like, man, I can tell even when I'm just, okay, I'm running low, I'm a little bit off. And I know even when I do a little bit of this, I can feel a marked difference and a measured difference in that. That's very cool too.
Yeah. And it's cool too. Like, again, the compounded effect, it blows my mind. I think this is why Sherry is such a big fan of this too. Like the compound effect is the most mind blowing thing. Because when I first started, I had yoga and meditation. Okay, great. Now I have literally a list of almost 200 things that, even if my mind's telling me, I don't know what to do right now, I have a list of 200 things that I can point at one and do that thing. It's going to make me feel better.
That's
So
amazing.
it's like my repertoire of tools has grown more and more and more and more, because as you do a little one, you know the feeling. So the next time you experience the feeling, go, oh, I need to add that to my list. This is something else that I can use as a crutch, but it's like a healing crutch.
Yeah, definitely. That's wonderful. Well, Molly, I'm sure there's going to be some people after hearing this that want to meet you or get a chance to talk to you or share some stuff, maybe hire you for what's going on.
Yeah.
But pimp yourself out a little bit. Where can people find you if they want to come talk to you?
So, like I said, I don't do a lot of marketing and advertising, but I do share a lot of my own personal story on Facebook. And I'm always asking people, connect, share your own stories, do whatever on my Facebook page. You could simply search it, Molly Butler. I'm usually the first one that pops up. It says self-love, self-care coach. That's the right one. I also have a website, mollyb.co. It's mostly just like blogs of like my own personal story and stuff there, but there's ways to contact me through email through that too.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing
You're
this.
so
Everybody,
welcome.
build a self-care routine, build a self-love routine where you pour
Yes.
yourself like everything else. But thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
thanks for having me. It was so much fun.
Definitely. Ladies and gentlemen, that is A New Perspective. Go out there and hang out with Molly, get a self-care routine, and we'll see you next time.